The scream of hunger clawed at Zelda's throat as she crept through the pre-dawn darkness toward the weathered barn, clutching a cloth bundle containing the last scraps of bread and dried meat she'd stolen from the hotel kitchen, where she worked washing dishes for pennies. Parowan, Utah in the spring of 1882 was a harsh place for a woman alone, and Zelda Sutton had learned that lesson with brutal clarity in the 3 months since she'd fled her stepfather's house in Salt Lake City. At 19 years old, she'd expected life to offer more than beatings and forced labor, but freedom had proven just as cruel in different ways. The room she rented above the general store cost most of her meager wages, leaving barely enough for 1 meal a day. She'd grown gaunt, her dresses hanging loose on her frame, her cheekbones sharp beneath skin that had lost its healthy glow. But the barn cats behind the Johnson Ranch on the edge of town had become her secret companions, her only source of comfort in this lonely existence. She'd discovered them 2 weeks ago when she'd taken a different route home from work, trying to avoid the drunk cowboys who sometimes lingered outside the saloon. The mama cat with her litter of kittens had looked at her with such desperate, knowing eyes that Zelda had split her own dinner with them that night. She'd been coming back ever since, even when it meant going hungry herself. The barn loomed before her, silvered by moonlight, and Zelda moved quietly toward the back corner where the cats usually waited. She knelt in the dirt, setting down her bundle and unwrapping it carefully. The mama cat emerged from the shadows first, followed by her 4 kittens, their tiny mews breaking the silence. "Hello, sweethearts," Zelda whispered, breaking the bread into smaller pieces. "I know it is not much, but it is all I have today." The cats fell upon the food with desperate hunger that mirrored her own, and Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. At least she could help these small creatures, even if she couldn't help herself. She reached out to stroke the mama cat's fur, feeling the prominent ridge of her spine. "We are all just trying to survive, are we not?" she murmured. "Yes, we are." The deep male voice from behind her sent Zelda's heart into her throat. She spun around, losing her balance and falling backward into the dirt. A man stood silhouetted against the lightening sky, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat shadowing his features. "I did not mean to startle you," he said, his voice gentler now. He took a step forward, and the emerging dawn illuminated his face. He was young, perhaps 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that held an unexpected kindness. "I have been wondering who was feeding my barn cats." "Your cats," Zelda breathed, scrambling to her feet. "I am so sorry. I did not mean to trespass. I will go." She gathered her cloth, her hands shaking. "Wait." He held up a hand. "I am not angry. I am grateful." He moved closer, and she could see the concern in his expression as he studied her face. "You look like you need the food more than they do." Shame burned through Zelda, hot and mortifying. She lifted her chin, trying to salvage some dignity. "I manage just fine, Mr. Johnson." "It is just Vaughn," he said. "Vaughn Jensen, and I think we both know that is not true." He gestured toward the barn. "When did you last eat a full meal? That is none of your concern." She moved to step around him, but her vision swam suddenly, black spots dancing at the edges. She swayed, and his hand shot out to steady her, warm and strong on her elbow. "Easy," he said. "When did you last eat anything at all?" "Yesterday morning," she admitted, hating how weak her voice sounded. "But I will be fine. I get paid tomorrow." "Yesterday morning." He repeated the words like they physically pained him. "And you gave what you had to my cats. They have kittens to feed. So do you have yourself to feed?" His grip on her elbow tightened slightly, not painful but insistent. "Come inside. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, will have breakfast started by now." "I cannot." Zelda tried to pull away, but her body betrayed her, trembling with exhaustion. I need to get home before my landlord realizes I left. Your landlord does not own you. Vaughn's voice held an edge of steel now. And I am not letting you walk away when you can barely stand. Consider it payment for caring for my cats. The mention of payment gave Zelda pause. She was not accepting charity then. Just fair compensation for services rendered. The logic was thin, but her hunger was thick and overwhelming, clouding her judgment. Just breakfast, she said finally. And then I must go. Just breakfast, he agreed, but something in his tone suggested he had no intention of keeping that promise. He led her toward the ranch house, a sturdy structure of wood and stone that spoke of prosperity and permanence. Zelda had passed it dozens of times, but had never imagined she'd be walking through its front door. Inside, the warmth enveloped her, and the scent of coffee and frying bacon made her stomach clench painfully. A small Chinese woman appeared from what must be the kitchen, her dark eyes widening at the sight of Zelda. "Mr. Vaughn, who is this?" "Mrs. Chen. This is Miss Sutton. She will be joining us for breakfast." Vaughn guided Zelda to a chair at the large wooden table. "She has been feeding the barn cats. Feeding the cats." Mrs. Chen's expression softened immediately. "Such a kind heart. You sit, dear. I will bring food." She disappeared back into the kitchen, and Zelda found herself alone with Vaughn. He'd removed his hat, revealing the full handsomeness of his features. There was something open about his face, an honesty that was rare in her experience with men. "How long have you been in Parowan?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. 3 months. Zelda folded her hands in her lap, trying to still their trembling. "I came from Salt Lake City. Family there." "No." The word came out harder than she intended. "No family." He heard the finality in her tone and nodded, not pressing further. "What brought you here?" "Work. I heard the hotel needed kitchen help." It was not entirely a lie, though the truth was more complicated. She'd chosen Parowan because it was far enough from Salt Lake City that her stepfather would not think to look for her, but close enough that she could reach it with the few coins she'd saved. Mrs. Chen returned with plates piled high with bacon, eggs, and thick slices of bread slathered with butter. Zelda's eyes widened at the abundance, and she had to force herself not to fall upon it like the starving cats had done with her scraps. "Eat," Vaughn said simply, picking up his own fork. She tried to maintain some semblance of dignity, but hunger won out. She ate steadily, methodically, each bite an explosion of flavor and satisfaction. Vaughn watched her without comment, though she felt his gaze like a physical thing. "The hotel does not pay well," he observed after several minutes. "No," Zelda swallowed a mouthful of eggs, "but it is honest work that leaves you starving." He set down his fork. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Sutton." Zelda's hand stilled on her silverware, wariness flooding through her. She'd heard propositions before from men who thought a desperate woman would agree to anything. "What kind of proposition?" "Nothing improper," he said quickly, reading her expression. "I need help here at the ranch. Mrs. Chen does her best, but she is getting older and the house is large. I also need someone to help with the animals. The barn cats, yes, but also the chickens, the milk cow, the horses. Someone to help with feeding and basic care. You want to hire me?" Zelda could not keep the disbelief from her voice. "I want to hire you," he confirmed. "You would have your own room in the house, separate and private, 3 meals a day, a fair wage better than what the hotel pays. In return, you would help Mrs. Chen with the housework and take over care of the animals." It sounded too good to be true, and Zelda's instincts screamed at her to be cautious. "Why? Why what? Why would you offer this to a stranger? You know nothing about me." Vaughn leaned back in his chair, considering her question seriously. I know you were willing to starve yourself to feed hungry animals. I know you work hard for terrible pay and still show up every day. I know you are proud and independent because you tried to refuse help even when you were about to collapse. He met her eyes steadily. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. You are trusting, Zelda said softly. Maybe. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. But I am also practical. I need help and you need a better situation. It benefits us both. Mrs. Chen had returned to clear the plates and she nodded approvingly. Good idea, Mr. Vaughn. This house needs younger hands. My bones ache in the mornings now. Zelda looked between them, her mind racing. It was risk, certainly. But was it any more dangerous than slowly starving to death in a rented room? At least here she would have food and shelter, and Vaughn Jensen did not look at her the way other men did, with hunger and calculation. He looked at her like she was a person, not a thing to be used. I would need to give notice at the hotel, she said slowly. Of course. Vaughn's smile widened. When can you start? I work today and tomorrow. I could begin the day after if that suits you. That suits me perfectly. He stood, extending his hand. Welcome to the Jensen Ranch, Miss Sutton. She shook his hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work, and something shifted in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of trust. The next 2 days passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Zelda gave her notice to the hotel manager, who barely acknowledged her departure, and packed her few belongings into a single carpet bag. Her landlord was equally indifferent, taking her key without comment. She'd made no friends in Parowan, formed no attachments, and as she walked toward the Jensen Ranch on that third morning, she realized she was leaving nothing behind. Vaughn met her at the gate, taking her bag before she could protest. Mrs. Chen has your room ready. It is on the 2nd floor, overlooks the back pasture. I think you will like it. The room proved to be more than she could have imagined. Clean and bright, with a real bed covered in a thick quilt, a dresser with a mirror, and a window that let in streams of morning sunlight. It was larger than her entire previous room and infinitely more welcoming. This is too much, she said, setting her bag on the bed. It is just a room. Vaughn stood in the doorway, respecting the boundary. You will earn your keep, I promise. Mrs. Chen has a long list of tasks. He was not lying. Mrs. Chen proved to be a kind but exacting taskmaster, walking Zelda through the daily routines of the household. There was bread to bake, laundry to wash, floors to scrub, vegetables to tend in the garden. But there was also food, abundant and nourishing, and Zelda felt her strength returning with each passing day. The animal care became her favorite duty. The barn cats remembered her, twining around her ankles as she brought them proper food now, not stolen scraps. The chickens clucked contentedly as she scattered their grain. The milk cow, a placid creature named Buttercup, gave her milk with gentle patience while Zelda learned the rhythm of milking. And then there were the horses. Vaughn raised horses, breeding and training them for ranch work and distance riding. He had 6 at present, ranging from a spirited 3-year-old gelding to an ancient mare who'd earned her retirement. Zelda had limited experience with horses, but Vaughn proved to be a patient teacher. Hold your hand flat like this, he instructed, demonstrating how to offer an apple to the chestnut mare. You do not want her to accidentally catch your fingers. Zelda mimicked his position, and the mare lipped the apple slice gently from her palm. The soft warmth of the horse's breath, the delicate precision of her movements filled Zelda with unexpected joy. She likes you, Vaughn observed. Rosie is usually cautious with new people. She is beautiful. Zelda stroked the mare's neck, marveling at the sleekness of her coat. She is one of my best. Pride warmed his voice. Her foals always have excellent temperaments. I am hoping she will have another one next spring." As the days turned into weeks, Zelda found herself settling into the rhythms of ranch life. She rose with the sun, spent her mornings helping Mrs. Chen with household tasks, and devoted her afternoons to the animals. Vaughn was a constant presence, always working, always moving, but he made time to check on her progress, to answer her questions, to teach her new skills. She learned that he'd inherited the ranch from his father 2 years ago, after a winter fever had taken both his parents within days of each other. He'd been only 23, thrust suddenly into responsibility, and he'd poured his grief into building something worthy of their legacy. "They would be proud of what you have done," Zelda told him one evening as they stood watching the sunset paint the Utah sky in shades of orange and purple. "I hope so." He glanced at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "They always believed in helping people who needed it. I think they would like that you are here." "I am grateful to be here," she said honestly. "You saved my life, Vaughn. You saved your own life. I just provided the opportunity." He turned back to the sunset. "But I am glad you took it." The first hint that her feelings were growing into something more than gratitude came a month after her arrival. Vaughn had been working with the young gelding, training him to respond to subtle rain cues, when the horse suddenly spooked at a rattlesnake hidden in the tall grass. Vaughn managed to keep his seat, but the gelding reared and twisted, and for one heart-stopping moment, Zelda was certain he would be thrown. She did not remember running toward the corral, did not remember climbing the fence. She only knew that her heart was pounding with terror, her hands gripping the rail until her knuckles went white. Vaughn brought the gelding under control, speaking in low, soothing tones until the horse settled. When he dismounted and looked up to see Zelda white-faced and trembling, his expression shifted. "I am fine," he said, crossing to her. "Zelda, I am fine. You could have been killed." Her voice shook, "but I was not." He reached up, covering one of her hands with his. "I have been riding since I was 5 years old. It takes more than a spook to unseat me. That does not make it less frightening to watch." She could not seem to stop trembling. Something flickered in his eyes, understanding and something warmer. "You were worried about me." "Of course I was worried. You are my employer. If something happened to you, I would lose my position." The words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Your employer." He repeated the words softly. "Is that all I am?" Zelda could not answer. Could not admit what she'd only just begun to acknowledge to herself. That she looked forward to their conversations each evening, that his smile had become the highlight of her day, that she'd started paying attention to the way his hair curled when it was damp from washing, the way his hands moved with such sureness and skill, the way his laugh rumbled up from deep in his chest. "Zelda." He said her name like a question, like a prayer. "I should get back to the house," she whispered. "Mrs. Chen needs help with dinner." She fled before he could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs. That night, lying in her bed, she forced herself to confront the truth. She was falling in love with Vaughn Jensen, and it was the most foolish thing she could possibly do. He was her employer, her benefactor. He'd saved her from starvation and given her a place to belong. To mistake his kindness for romantic interest would be to jeopardize everything she'd built here. And even if, impossibly, he returned her feelings, what kind of future could they have? She was a penniless nobody with a past she'd run from. He was a successful rancher who deserved someone better. She resolved to maintain a proper distance, to remember her place. The resolution lasted exactly 2 days. She was in the barn, mucking out the horse stalls when she heard voices from outside. Male voices, rough and demanding. She set down her pitchfork and moved to the door, peering out. 3 men sat on horseback in the yard, and Vaughn stood facing them, his posture tense. Even from a distance, Zelda could see these were not friendly visitors. They had the look of hired guns, all swagger and barely concealed violence. "Just let us search the property, Jensen," the leader said. "We are looking for someone, and we heard you hired a new girl recently." Ice flooded Zelda's veins. They were looking for her. Somehow, impossibly, her stepfather had tracked her down. "I do not let strangers search my property," Vaughn said flatly. "You want to look around, you get the sheriff and a warrant. Do not need a warrant to find stolen property." The leader leaned forward in his saddle. "The girl took money when she ran. That makes her a thief." "I never," Zelda breathed, but her voice was lost in the pounding of her heart. It was a lie, of course. She'd taken nothing but her own belongings. But her stepfather had connections, money to bribe the right people, and who would take her word against his? "Even if I did have a girl working here, which I am not confirming, I would not hand her over to 3 armed men without proof of your claims." Vaughn's hand had moved subtly to rest on the gun at his hip. "So I suggest you ride on before this gets unpleasant. You are making a mistake, Jensen." "It would not be my first." Vaughn's voice held an edge of steel. "Leave. Now." The 3 men exchanged glances, and for a moment Zelda thought violence would erupt. Then the leader spat in the dirt and jerked his horse's head around. "We will be back." They rode off, and Zelda sagged against the barn wall, her legs barely holding her. Vaughn turned and saw her in the doorway, and his expression shifted from anger to concern. He crossed the yard in long strides. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough." She could not meet his eyes. "I am sorry. I did not mean to bring trouble to your door. Did you steal money from someone?" "No." The word came out fierce. "I took nothing that was not mine. My stepfather is a liar and a tyrant, and he cannot stand that I escaped his control." "Your stepfather?" Vaughn's jaw tightened. "He sent those men." "Almost certainly. He has money and influence in Salt Lake City. I should leave before he causes you real problems." "You are not going anywhere." Vaughn's hand caught her arm, gentle but firm. "This is your home now. I am not letting anyone take you away." "You do not understand what you are risking. He will make trouble for you, ruin your reputation, maybe worse. Then we will deal with it together." He ducked his head, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Zelda, you belong here with us, with me. I am not letting you face this alone." The words echoed the ones she'd heard him speak to the barn cats weeks ago when he'd found an injured stray and brought it in for care. "You belong here with us." It had moved her then, the simple acceptance in his voice. Now applied to her, it broke something open inside her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much? Do you really not know?" His free hand came up to cup her cheek, and the tenderness in the gesture stole her breath. "I have been half in love with you since I found you sharing your last scraps of food with hungry cats. Watching you bloom here, seeing your strength and kindness every day, it has only made me fall harder." "Vaughn." His name was all she could manage. "You do not have to feel the same," he said quickly. "If you want to keep this strictly as employer and employee, I will respect that. But I needed you to know that I am not protecting you out of obligation or charity. I am protecting you because the thought of losing you is unbearable." Zelda reached up, covering his hand with hers. "I fell in love with you when you trusted me enough to offer me a place here. Every day since has only proven that trust was not misplaced. But Vaughn, I come with trouble. My stepfather will not give up easily. Then we prepare." His thumb stroked across her cheekbone. "Tomorrow I will ride into town and talk to the sheriff. We will make sure everyone knows the truth of the situation. And if your stepfather wants a fight, he will find I am not easily intimidated. I do not want you to get hurt because of me. I am a grown man, Zelda. I can make my own choices about what risks are worth taking." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her face. and you are worth any risk." She closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was equal parts desperation and hope. He responded immediately, his arms coming around her to pull her close, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, just this perfect connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vaughn rested his forehead against hers. "We will figure this out," he promised. Together. True to his word, Vaughn rode into Parowan the next morning to speak with Sheriff Morrison. Zelda spent the day in an agony of waiting, jumping at every sound, imagining scenarios where her stepfather's men returned or where the sheriff sided against her. Mrs. Chen tried to keep her busy with tasks, but her hands shook too badly to be useful. When Vaughn finally returned in the late afternoon, Zelda met him at the door. One look at his face told her the news was not entirely good. "The sheriff will help," he said, swinging down from his horse. "But there are complications. Your stepfather filed a formal complaint claiming you stole $500. That makes it a serious charge." $500. Zelda felt sick. "I have never seen that much money in my life." "I know, but proving it is going to be difficult." He handed his horse's reins to her absently, his mind clearly working through the problem. "Morrison suggested you write a statement detailing why you left, what conditions you were living under. If we can establish a pattern of abuse, it will undermine your stepfather's credibility." "He never left marks where they would show," Zelda said quietly. "And he was careful. It was always discipline, always for my own good. Who would believe me over him? I believe you." Vaughn took her hands. "And Morrison seems inclined to believe you too. He said he has dealt with your stepfather before, knows his type. But we need evidence, testimony, something concrete. There was a neighbor woman, Mrs. Walker. She knew what was happening. She helped me a few times, let me stay with her when things got bad. But I do not know if she would be willing to testify. It is worth asking." Vaughn squeezed her hands. "Will you write the statement? Everything you remember, no matter how small." Zelda nodded, though the thought of putting those memories into words made her want to be sick. That night after dinner, she sat at the kitchen table with paper and pen and forced herself to write. The words came slowly at first, then faster, pouring out in a torrent of remembered pain and fear. She wrote about her mother's death when she was 15, about how her stepfather's treatment had changed immediately after the funeral, about the work he'd demanded, the meals he'd withheld as punishment, the way he'd isolated her from friends and any potential support, about the night he'd told her he'd arranged a marriage for her to a business associate twice her age, and how she'd known she had to run or be trapped forever. Vaughn found her hours later, her face streaked with tears, her hand cramping from writing. He read what she'd written in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. "This man is a monster," he said finally, his voice tight with rage. "He is powerful." Zelda wiped at her eyes. "And I am no one." "You are not no one. You are smart and brave and strong, and you survived him." Vaughn knelt beside her chair. "We will take this to Morrison tomorrow, and I am writing my own statement, testifying to your character and the circumstances in which I found you. That could make you a target too. Good. Let your stepfather come after me directly. I would welcome the chance to show him what happens to men who hurt women in my territory." The protective fury in his voice should have frightened her, but instead it made her feel safe in a way she'd never experienced before. The next morning, they rode into town together. Sheriff Morrison read both statements carefully, asking pointed questions about dates and details. He was a weathered man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This paints a clear picture," he said finally. "But Sutton has already been spreading his version around town. Claims you seduced his stepdaughter away." Jensen filled her head with lies about him. "That is ridiculous," Vaughn said flatly. "I know it is. But mud sticks, especially when it is thrown by a man with money." Morrison tapped the papers. "I will do what I can to investigate, but in the meantime, you both need to be careful. Men like Sutton do not play fair." The warning proved prophetic. Over the next week, rumors began circulating through Parowan. Zelda was a thief, a temptress, a girl of loose morals who'd run away to carry on an illicit affair. Vaughn was a fool who'd been taken in by a pretty face, a man who'd chosen the word of a stranger over that of a respectable businessman. When Zelda went into town for supplies, conversation stopped at her approach. Women whispered behind their hands. The shopkeeper served her with tight-lipped disapproval. She returned to the ranch feeling humiliated and angry. "Let them talk," Vaughn said when she told him what had happened. "The people who matter know the truth." But it wore on her, the constant weight of suspicion and judgment. She found herself withdrawing, spending more time with the animals and less with people. The barn cats did not care about her reputation. The horses did not whisper behind her back. It was during one of these solitary afternoons that Mrs. Walker found her. Zelda was grooming Rosie when she heard a wagon approach. She looked up to see a stout woman in her 50s climbing down, her face creased with concern. "Zelda Sutton," the woman called. "Is that you, child?" Zelda's heart leaped. "Mrs. Walker," in the flesh. Mrs. Walker crossed the yard with surprising speed and pulled Zelda into a fierce hug. "I heard you were here, heard the terrible things being said about you. I came as soon as I could manage the journey." "You came all the way from Salt Lake City, 3 days' travel and worth every mile." Mrs. Walker held her at arm's length, studying her face. "You look better than when I last saw you, healthier, happier despite the circumstances." "I am better." Zelda blinked back tears. "But my stepfather is causing trouble. He claims I stole from him." "That man would not know the truth if it bit him." Mrs. Walker's expression hardened. "I came to testify on your behalf if you will have me. I should have done more when you were under his roof. The least I can do now is help clear your name." Hope surged through Zelda's chest. "You would do that, child. I have been feeling guilty for years about not doing more to help you. Your mother was my friend, and I failed her by not protecting you after she died. Let me help now." They went inside, and Mrs. Walker spent the next hour telling her story to Vaughn and Mrs. Chen. She described finding Zelda locked in the cellar as punishment, seeing bruises hidden under long sleeves, the way Albert Sutton controlled every aspect of his stepdaughter's life. "I tried to convince her to come stay with me," Mrs. Walker said, "but she was afraid he would hurt me if I interfered. The night she ran, she came to my house first. I gave her what money I could spare and helped her pack. I have been praying every day that she made it somewhere safe." "She is safe here," Vaughn said firmly, "and your testimony could make all the difference." They returned to Sheriff Morrison the next day, Mrs. Walker's statement adding crucial corroboration to Zelda's account. Morrison's expression grew more grim as he read. "This is enough for me to open a formal investigation into Sutton," he said. "I will send wires to Salt Lake City, talk to other neighbors, see what else I can uncover. In the meantime, the theft charges against Miss Sutton are suspended pending further evidence." "What does that mean?" Zelda asked. "It means I am not arresting you, and I am not letting anyone else arrest you either. You are free to go about your business while I sort this out." He looked at her kindly. "You did nothing wrong, Miss Sutton. I think we are going to prove that conclusively." The relief was almost overwhelming. Zelda thanked him profusely, and when they left his office, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Mrs. Walker stayed at the ranch for several days, and her presence brought unexpected joy. She fussed over Zelda, praising how healthy she looked, admiring the ranch and the work she was doing. She took an immediate liking to Vaughn, pulling him aside for what Zelda suspected was a thorough interrogation about his intentions. "He is a good man," Mrs. Walker pronounced that evening. "Your mother would have approved." "We are not formally courting," Zelda protested, though the words felt hollow. What else would you call the way Vaughn held her hand during evening walks, the way he kissed her goodnight at her bedroom door, the way they talked for hours about everything and nothing? You are in love with each other. Anyone with eyes can see it. Mrs. Walker patted her hand. "Do not let fear hold you back from happiness, child. You have had precious little of it in your life." When Mrs. Walker finally left to return to Salt Lake City, she promised to keep working on Zelda's behalf, gathering more testimony from neighbors who'd witnessed Albert Sutton's cruelty. Zelda hugged her goodbye with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by gratitude for this woman's steadfast support. The investigation took 3 more weeks, during which Zelda and Vaughn existed in a strange limbo between fear and hope. They grew closer during this time, their relationship deepening beyond romance into true partnership. Zelda began taking on more responsibility for the ranch, helping Vaughn with training the horses, managing the books, planning for next year's breeding season. "You have a good head for this," Vaughn told her one afternoon as they reviewed the accounts together. "Better than mine, honestly. I like the puzzle of it, figuring out how to make everything balance." Zelda tapped the ledger with her pencil. "If we sell these 3 yearlings at the autumn horse fair, we will have enough to buy that breeding stallion you have been eyeing. His bloodline would improve the herd significantly. Look at you, thinking like a rancher." Pride and affection warmed his voice. "Have I told you lately that you are remarkable? Not in the last hour." She felt herself blush. He leaned over and kissed her soft and sweet. "You are remarkable, and if you will have me, I would like to make this partnership permanent." Zelda's breath caught. "Vaughn, I know the timing is not ideal with everything still uncertain, but I do not want to wait anymore. I love you, Zelda Sutton. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build this ranch together, raise a family together, grow old together." He took her hands. "Will you marry me?" Joy and fear warred in her chest. What if the charges are not dropped? What if my stepfather finds some way to have me arrested? Then I will be standing beside you as your husband with all the legal protections that provides. You will not face anything alone ever again. His eyes searched hers. "But if you need more time, if you are not ready, I will wait." "I do not need more time." The words came out sure and clear. "I love you, Vaughn Jensen. Yes, I will marry you." His whoop of joy startled the barn cats, and he swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her with such fierce tenderness that she felt tears spring to her eyes. "We should wait until this legal mess is resolved," she said when they finally broke apart. "I do not want our wedding shadowed by uncertainty." "Whatever you want." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Though I warn you, Mrs. Chen is going to start planning the moment we tell her." He was right. Mrs. Chen's face lit up when they shared the news, and she immediately began listing everything they would need. A new dress for Zelda, flowers for the church, a feast to celebrate afterward. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and even Zelda found herself getting caught up in the planning. Sheriff Morrison finally sent word a week later. They were to come to his office immediately. Zelda's stomach churned with nerves as they rode into town, Vaughn's hand steady on hers. Morrison smiled when they entered, and Zelda's knees nearly gave out with relief. "Good news," he said. "We found multiple witnesses in Salt Lake City willing to testify to Sutton's abuse. More importantly, we found his accounting ledger. The money he claims you stole. It is right there in his records, accounted for in business expenses. He never lost any money." He made up the theft to have grounds to pursue you." "So the charges are dropped?" Vaughn asked. "Completely. And I have forwarded evidence of his false report to the authorities in Salt Lake City. He is the one facing charges now, for filing a false claim and for the documented abuse." Morrison handed Zelda a formal document. "You are free and clear, Miss Sutton, and you have my apology for what you have endured." Zelda stared at the document, the words swimming before her eyes. "It is over. It is over." She turned to Vaughn, and he caught her as her legs finally gave way, holding her while she sobbed with relief. All the fear, all the uncertainty, all the months of running and hiding finally released in a torrent of tears. When she could breathe again, Morrison cleared his throat awkwardly. "There is one more thing. Sutton's wife, your mother's cousin, has reached out. Apparently, she did not know the full extent of what was happening. She wants to make amends if you are willing. No pressure," he added quickly. "Just passing along the message." Zelda considered this. Her stepfather's wife had been a distant presence in the house, often away visiting family. Perhaps she truly had not known, or perhaps she had chosen not to see. Either way, Zelda found she had no anger left for her. "Tell her I wish her well, but I have no desire for contact," she said finally. "My life is here now." Morrison nodded approvingly. "I will pass that along." They left his office walking on air, and Vaughn surprised her by pulling her into the general store. "Pick out fabric," he said, "for your wedding dress. We are getting married as soon as we can arrange it." "Vaughn, we should wait, be practical." "I have been practical my whole life." He cupped her face in his hands right there in the middle of the store, ignoring the stares of other customers. "I am done waiting for my happiness. Marry me this Sunday, Zelda, please." How could she refuse when he looked at her like that, like she was his whole world? "This Sunday," she agreed. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Mrs. Chen enlisted half the women in town to help sew Zelda's dress, a simple but beautiful creation of cream linen with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Vaughn arranged for the church, spoke with the minister, invited everyone they knew. The rumors that had plagued them transformed overnight into excited gossip about the upcoming wedding. Women who had whispered behind Zelda's back now offered congratulations. The shopkeeper who'd served her with disapproval now pressed small gifts into her hands. It would have been infuriating if it were not so typical of human nature. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a blessing. Zelda woke in her room at the ranch for what would be the last time as an unmarried woman. Mrs. Chen and several other women descended to help her prepare, washing and arranging her hair, lacing her into the dress, adorning her with wildflowers gathered from the meadow. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the gaunt, frightened girl who'd crept through the darkness to feed barn cats. In her place stood someone healthy and radiant, glowing with happiness and hope. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Chen said, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Like a daughter to me. I am so happy for you and Mr. Vaughn." The church was packed when they arrived, filled with people from the town and surrounding ranches. Zelda processed down the aisle on Mrs. Walker's arm, the older woman having returned specifically for the wedding. But she had eyes only for Vaughn, standing at the altar in his best suit, looking at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever prayed. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They spoke their vows in clear, sure voices, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life brought. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vaughn kissed her with such joy that the congregation broke into spontaneous applause. The celebration afterward at the ranch was more elaborate than Zelda had expected. Tables groaned under the weight of food brought by generous neighbors. A fiddler played lively tunes, and couples danced in the yard as the sun tracked across the sky. Zelda found herself passed from one well-wisher to another, accepting congratulations and good wishes until her face ached from smiling. But the best moment came late in the evening, when the last guest had finally departed, and she and Vaughn stood alone in the twilight. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Hello, wife," he said softly. "Hello, husband." She leaned into his side, feeling the solid warmth of him. "Are you happy?" "Happier than I knew it was possible to be." She looked up at him. "Thank you for finding me that morning. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else." "You were never invisible, Zelda. You were just waiting for someone to look." He bent to kiss her forehead. "I am the lucky one. You could have gone anywhere, chosen anyone, but you stayed here with me." "You told me I belonged here," she reminded him. "With us," you said. "You made me believe I could have a home, a family, a future. How could I go anywhere else?" They stood together as the stars emerged overhead, the barn cats winding around their ankles, the horses nickering softly in their stalls. Zelda thought about the girl she'd been, starving and desperate, and marveled at the distance she'd traveled. Not in miles, but in transformation. Their first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The ranch demanded constant work, especially as Vaughn expanded the horse breeding operation. Zelda proved to have a natural talent for training, her gentleness and patience producing horses that were both spirited and biddable. Word spread, and buyers began coming from as far as Colorado and Nevada to purchase Jensen horses. They hired 2 hands to help with the heavier work, freeing Vaughn to focus on breeding decisions and Zelda to manage the business side. She negotiated prices with a shrewdness that surprised the buyers and delighted her husband. By the end of that first year, the ranch was more profitable than it had been in a decade. But the best news came in early winter, when Zelda's morning sickness finally forced her to admit what she'd begun to suspect. She was pregnant. Vaughn's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with delight, then immediately set her down and fussed about whether spinning was safe for the baby. His protectiveness over the following months was both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but Zelda bore it with good humor. After a lifetime of no one caring about her well-being, having someone care too much was a problem she could happily tolerate. Mrs. Chen became an indispensable source of wisdom, having helped deliver countless babies in her years. She made special soups to combat morning sickness, brewed teas to ease Zelda's aching back, and assured her that everything she was experiencing was perfectly normal. Vaughn transformed one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, building a cradle with his own hands and painting the walls a cheerful yellow. Zelda sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart swelling with anticipation each time she imagined the small life who would wear them. The birth came on a hot July afternoon in 1883, after 12 hours of labor that left Zelda exhausted and triumphant. When Mrs. Chen placed the baby in her arms, announcing a boy, healthy and strong, Zelda wept with joy. Vaughn, who'd paced the hallway wearing a path in the floorboards, nearly fell over himself getting into the room. When he saw his son, his face crumpled with emotion. "He is perfect," he breathed, running a gentle finger over the baby's downy hair. "Zelda, he is perfect." "What should we name him?" she asked. They discussed names endlessly over the past months, never quite settling on one. But looking at her son's tiny, perfect face, Zelda knew. "Thomas," she said. "After my father, Thomas Jensen." "Thomas." Vaughn tested the name, then smiled. "It suits him." "Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the family." Thomas proved to be a content baby, healthy and curious from the start. Zelda marveled at how her capacity for love expanded, how she could look at this small person and feel her heart might burst. Vaughn was a devoted father, doting on his son while still making sure Zelda felt cherished and supported. The barn cats became Thomas's first playmates as he grew into a toddler. He would sit in the barn for hours, the cats climbing over him while he giggled with delight. It seemed fitting, Zelda thought, that her son should bond with the creatures who'd inadvertently brought his parents together. When Thomas was 2, Zelda found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. The birth, in the spring of 1885, brought them a daughter. "She looks like you," Vaughn said, cradling the baby girl with infinite tenderness. "She has your eyes." They named her Rose after the mare who'd first helped Zelda feel at home on the ranch. Little Rose proved to have her mother's gentle spirit and her father's determination, a combination that suggested she would be a force to be reckoned with as she grew. The years flowed past, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their growing family. Thomas grew tall and strong, showing early aptitude for working with horses. Rose proved to be fearless, climbing before she could walk and insisting on helping with every task. A third child, another boy they named Samuel, arrived when Thomas was 6, completing their family. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming known throughout Utah and beyond for the quality of its horses. Zelda's business acumen combined with Vaughn's breeding expertise created an operation that was both successful and sustainable. They hired more hands, expanded the pastures, built a larger barn. But through all the growth and change, they never forgot where they'd started. Every evening, no matter how busy the day, Vaughn and Zelda made time to walk together, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. And every morning, Zelda went to the barn to feed the cats, bringing her children with her to teach them about kindness to small creatures. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vaughn woke Zelda before dawn and led her outside. In the barn, the descendants of the original mama cat wound around their ankles, purring. The horses nickered greeting from their stalls. The first light of sunrise painted the Utah sky in shades of pink and gold. "You remember the first morning I found you here?" Vaughn asked. "Every detail." Zelda leaned against his shoulder. "I was so frightened, so hungry, so alone. Not alone, you just did not know it yet." He turned her to face him. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us, on this life we have built. I should be thanking you, you saved me." "We saved each other." He kissed her softly. "And we are going to keep saving each other every day for the rest of our lives." From the house, they heard Thomas calling for them, his voice mingling with Rose's laughter and Samuel's excited chatter. Their children, their future, calling them home. Zelda took Vaughn's hand, lacing their fingers together just as she had on that first day when he'd welcomed her into his life. They walked toward the house together, toward the family they'd created, the life they'd built from scraps and hope and stubborn love. The barn cats followed, as they always did, tails high and confident. They knew where they belonged, just as Zelda finally knew where she belonged. Here, with the man who'd looked at a starving stranger and seen someone worth saving. Here, with the children who'd never know hunger or fear or loneliness. Here, on this ranch in Utah, where kindness to small creatures had blossomed into a love that would last generations. As the sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the land they'd built together, Zelda thought about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. The journey between those two selves had been painful and difficult, but also miraculous. Because sometimes salvation came in unexpected forms. Sometimes it came with barn cats and a cowboy who knew that belonging was not something you earned, but something you were freely given. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that moment of grace became the foundation for a lifetime of joy. The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of seasons and growth. Thomas grew into a young man with his father's height and his mother's shrewd intelligence. By 15, he was managing some of the horse training himself, showing a natural gift that surpassed even Vaughn's considerable skill. Rose, at 13, proved equally capable, though her interests ran more toward the business side. She would sit with Zelda for hours, learning to negotiate with buyers and manage the accounts. Samuel, the baby of the family at 9, was the dreamer, more interested in reading and learning than in ranch work. Zelda encouraged this difference, remembering her own struggles to fit into narrow expectations. When a traveling teacher passed through Parowan and mentioned the expanding opportunities for education in larger towns, Zelda and Vaughn began saving for Samuel's eventual schooling. "He might not be a rancher," Vaughn said one evening as they watched Samuel reading by lamplight, "but he will be something remarkable. I can feel it." "They are all remarkable," Zelda replied, "because they are growing up knowing they are loved and valued for exactly who they are." Mrs. Chen, now in her 70s, had finally retired from active work, though she still lived in the small cottage they'd built for her on the property. She spent her days tending her garden and doting on the Jensen children, who adored her in return. Her presence remained a blessing, a link to those early days when she'd helped Zelda find her footing. One autumn afternoon, when Zelda was 41 and Vaughn 47, a stranger arrived at the ranch. He was a young man, barely into his 20s, with nervous energy and eyes that kept darting toward the barn. "Can I help you?" Vaughn asked, his tone friendly but cautious. "I hope so, sir." The young man twisted his hat in his hands. "My name is Peter Hartley. I have been traveling for weeks, looking for work. Someone in town said you might need an extra hand for the winter." "We might," Vaughn allowed, "but we already have several applications. What makes you think you are the right choice?" Peter hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "Because I know what it is like to have nothing and be given a chance. My folks died 2 years back, left me with just debts and a horse. I have been working my way across the territory, trying to build something. And everyone I talk to says the Jensens are fair, that they treat people right. That is all I am asking for, sir. A fair chance." Zelda, who'd come out to join the conversation, felt her heart twist. She saw herself in this young man's desperation, remembered what it felt like to be adrift and alone. "When did you last eat?" she asked gently. Peter's face flushed. "Yesterday morning, madam." "Then come inside. We will feed you first, and then we can discuss employment." She glanced at Vaughn, who nodded with understanding. They'd made a practice over the years of helping people who needed it, remembering how a simple act of kindness had changed everything. Peter proved to be a hard worker and eager learner. More importantly, he had a way with the animals that reminded Zelda of her younger self. She watched him one morning, crouched in the barn and feeding scraps to the cats, his face soft with the same tenderness she'd felt all those years ago. "He is a good man," she told Vaughn that night. "Lost and looking for direction, but good at his core." "Should we keep him on permanently?" Vaughn asked. "I think we should. And maybe when he has saved enough, we could help him get started on his own place. Nothing large, just enough to build a future on." Vaughn smiled and pulled her close. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I have ever known. Have I told you that lately? Not in the last few hours." She nestled against his chest, still marveling after all these years at the safety she felt in his arms. They offered Peter a permanent position, with the promise that they would help him eventually establish his own small ranch. His gratitude was almost painful to witness, and Zelda understood that too. The weight of unexpected kindness, the disbelief that anyone would care, the desperate hope that this time things might work out. Christmas that year was particularly joyous. Their house overflowed with people, from their children to the ranch hands to Mrs. Chen and several families from town who'd become close friends over the years. Zelda looked around the crowded, noisy, chaotic dinner table and felt profound contentment. "What are you thinking?" Vaughn asked quietly, catching her expression. "That I used to believe I would die alone and forgotten," she said, "and now I have this, all of this. Sometimes it still does not feel real. It is real." He lifted her hand to his lips. "Every bit of it. You built this, Zelda. This family, this community, this life. You took the chance I offered and transformed it into something magnificent." "We transformed it," she corrected. "Together." That night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Zelda and Vaughn walked out to the barn as they had so many times before. The winter air was crisp and cold, the stars brilliant overhead. The barn cats, descendants many generations removed from that original mama cat, still greeted them with purrs and head bumps. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not come out that morning?" Vaughn asked. "If I had slept later or gone to a different part of the property?" "Sometimes," Zelda admitted. "But then I remember that you told me you'd been watching, trying to figure out who was feeding the cats. You would have found me eventually. It was meant to be." "You really believe that? In fate, in destiny?" "I believe that some things are meant to happen, yes. Not because they are predestined, but because when two people are meant to find each other, the universe conspires to bring them together." She turned to look at him, this man who'd given her everything. "We were meant to find each other, Vaughn, I am sure of it." He kissed her there in the barn, surrounded by cats and horses and the life they'd built together. And Zelda thought about that desperate girl who'd shared her last scraps of food with hungry animals, and the cowboy who'd looked at her and seen not a burden but a future. Who'd said those simple, powerful words that had changed everything. "You belong here with us." She had belonged here. She still belonged here. And she always would for the rest of her days. The rest of their lives unfolded with the grace that came from a strong foundation and mutual devotion. Thomas eventually married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and they built their home on the far edge of the Jensen ranch, expanding the operation while maintaining the family connection. Rose surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to study law, a nearly unheard of ambition for a woman. But Zelda and Vaughn supported her dream, scraping together money to send her to a progressive academy in Denver that accepted female students. Samuel, true to his studious nature, became a teacher, returning to Parowan to establish a proper school that served not just the town but the surrounding ranches. He married a quiet, bookish woman who shared his passion for education, and together they raised a new generation of children who had opportunities their parents had only dreamed of. Through it all, the ranch remained the heart of the family, the place they all returned to for holidays and celebrations. Zelda and Vaughn grew older together, their hair turning silver, their hands developing the aches and pains of decades of hard work. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it deepened, becoming something solid and unshakable, a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Zelda watched her grandson, Thomas's oldest boy, feeding the barn cats with the same gentle care she'd shown so long ago, and felt the circle complete itself. "He has your kindness," Vaughn said, coming to stand beside her. "He has your strength," she replied. "All of them do. They are the best of both of us." That evening, as the celebration wound down, Zelda and Vaughn walked once more to the barn. They moved more slowly now, their steps measured and careful, but they still made the journey. It had become a tradition, a ritual that anchored them to their beginning. 40 years, Vaughn mused. 40 years since I found you here, sneaking food to my cats. 40 years since you changed my life with 4 simple words. Zelda leaned against him, letting him take some of her weight. Her joints ached more these days, but standing here with him made every pain worthwhile. What 4 words? He sounded genuinely puzzled. You belong here with us. She smiled up at him. Do you not remember? That first day when I was so afraid and ashamed, you said those words. They gave me permission to hope again. I remember. His arm tightened around her shoulders, and I meant every word. You did belong here. You do belong here. This place would be nothing without you. This place would be a successful ranch without me, but it would not be a home. She turned in the circle of his arms. Thank you, Vaughn, for everything, for seeing me when I was invisible, for loving me when I could not love myself, for building this beautiful life with me. The thanks go both ways. He cupped her face in his weathered hands. You gave me purpose beyond just running a ranch. You gave me love and family and joy. You made my house a home, just as you said. They kissed, their lips familiar and sure after 4 decades together. Around them, the barn cats purred, the horses nickered softly, and the Utah stars blazed overhead. Everything was exactly as it should be. Inside the house, their family waited, 3 generations bound by love and the legacy of 2 people who'd found each other at their lowest moments and lifted each other up. Zelda thought about the hungry girl she'd been, the desperate measures she'd taken just to feed some stray cats. That simple act of compassion had set everything in motion, had led her to this moment, to this man, to this extraordinary life. Ready to go back? Vaughn asked. In a minute. Zelda wanted to hold on to this moment a little longer, to stand here where it had all begun and feel the weight of gratitude for everything that had followed. I just want to remember this, all of it. We have a lifetime of memories, he reminded her gently. I know. But this place, this barn, these cats, they are where our story started. Where a cowboy looked at a starving stranger and chose kindness over suspicion. Where everything changed. It changed for both of us. Vaughn's voice was thick with emotion. I did not know how lonely I was until you arrived. How much I needed someone to share all this with. You filled a space in my life I did not even know was empty. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Finally, Zelda took his hand, and they walked slowly back toward the house, toward the warmth and laughter of their family. The years rolled on as they always did. Zelda's health began to fail when she was 63, a persistent cough that eventually forced her to slow down. The doctor diagnosed it as consumption, and though they tried every treatment available, she grew steadily weaker. Vaughn refused to leave her side, sitting by her bed for hours, holding her hand and telling her stories about their life together. You have any regrets? He asked her one afternoon, his voice rough with unshed tears. Not a single one. Zelda's voice was weak, but certain. I have lived more in these 45 years with you than most people live in twice that time. I have known love and security and joy. I have raised beautiful children and watched them build their own beautiful lives. What could I possibly regret? I wish I could have given you more time. You gave me everything that mattered. She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. Promise me you will not stop living when I am gone. Our children and grandchildren need you. The ranch needs you. I cannot imagine this place without you in it. You do not have to imagine it yet. I am still here and I intend to fight as long as I can. She managed a smile. But eventually, my love, you will have to let me go. And when that time comes, You have to promise to keep living, to keep loving, to keep being the extraordinary man you are." "I promise," he whispered, though the words clearly cost him. Zelda held on through the spring and into the summer, determined to see one more harvest, one more season of the ranch in full bloom. She watched from her window as her grandson worked with the horses, as her granddaughter helped with the accounts, as all the pieces of the life she'd built continued to flourish. On a warm August evening, surrounded by her family, Zelda slipped away peacefully. Her last words were, "You belong here," spoken to Vaughn with a smile that held 45 years of love. Vaughn was devastated by her loss, stumbling through the funeral in a grief-stricken haze. But he kept his promise. He continued to run the ranch, to spend time with his children and grandchildren, to live even as his heart ached for the woman who transformed his life. Every morning, he went to the barn and fed the cats, continuing the tradition Zelda had started, remembering the day he'd found her there and recognized his future. He lived another 12 years without her, years that were filled with both sorrow and unexpected joy. He watched Rose become one of the first female lawyers in Utah, arguing cases with brilliant passion. He watched Samuel's school grow into a regional institution, educating hundreds of children. He watched Thomas expand the ranch into the largest horse breeding operation in 3 territories. And when his time finally came, at the age of 84, Vaughn died peacefully in his sleep, in the house he'd built with Zelda, surrounded by the love they'd created together. At his funeral, Thomas stood before the gathered crowd and told the story of how his parents had met. About a desperate young woman feeding stray cats with her last scraps of food, and a kind-hearted cowboy who'd seen beyond her circumstances to the remarkable person beneath. About how a simple act of compassion had blossomed into a love story that had shaped not just 2 lives, but generations of lives. "My father used to say that finding my mother was like finding the missing piece of himself," Thomas said, his voice strong despite his tears. "And my mother always said that my father taught her she was worthy of being found." Together, they built something extraordinary. Not just this ranch, not just our family, but a legacy of kindness and compassion that continues to this day. He gestured toward the barn, where the descendants of those original cats still made their home. "Every generation of our family has continued the tradition of feeding those cats. It is a reminder of where we came from, of the small acts of kindness that can change everything. My parents taught us that we all belong here in this world, in this life, that everyone deserves to be seen and valued and loved." The mourners filed past Vaughn's casket, paying their respects to a man who'd been beloved in the community. But the most meaningful tribute came from an unexpected source. Peter Hartley, now in his 60s and running his own successful ranch, approached Thomas after the service. "Your father gave me a chance when I had nothing," Peter said quietly. "Just like someone once gave him a chance to show kindness. He taught me that success is not just about building wealth or expanding operations. It is about building community, about helping others the way you have been helped. I want you to know that I have tried to live that lesson, to pass it forward." "That would mean everything to my father," Thomas replied, "and to my mother." The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management and eventually under his children's management after him. The tradition of feeding the barn cats was never broken, passed down through each generation along with the story of how it had all begun. The barn itself became something of a local landmark, a place where young couples would come to exchange vows, saying they wanted to start their marriages in the place where true love had first bloomed. The Jensen name became synonymous with quality horses and ethical business practices, but also with compassion and community support. Each generation found ways to help others the way Vaughn had once helped Zelda, offering chances to people who needed them, building a legacy of kindness that extended far beyond the ranch boundaries. And through it all, the barn cats multiplied and thrived, sleek and well-fed, living symbols of the moment when a hungry young woman's compassion for small creatures had set in motion a love story that would echo through generations. They wound around the ankles of Jensen children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, purring contentedly, knowing they would always be cared for, because in the end, that was the real legacy of Zelda Sutton and Vaughn Jensen. Not the successful ranch or the beautiful horses, or even the large, loving family. It was the understanding that everyone deserved to belong somewhere, that everyone had value, that small acts of kindness could transform lives in ways that rippled out across decades. It was the lesson that you did not have to be perfect or polished to deserve love and acceptance. You just had to be willing to show compassion, to see others clearly, and to say those 4 powerful words, "You belong here with us." And in a weathered barn in Parowan, Utah, surrounded by the descendants of cats that had once survived on stolen scraps, that legacy lived on, generation after generation, a testament to the enduring power of love that began with nothing more than kindness and hope.